Hi, my name is Aaron, this is my show Re-Education, and today we're going to be talking about the prison system. Now, I've talked a lot about the prison system on this channel in the past, so today we're going to be talking specifically about one particular prison that happens to be, for lack of a better word, an absolute hellish nightmare. And of course, I'm talking about the Mississippi State Penitentiary, one of the penitentiaries in Mississippi that have been getting a lot of news lately, and it's more colloquially known as Parchman Farm. Now, Parchman Farm, like I said, is a hellish nightmare of a place to live. The conditions are absolutely horrible. I'm going to be talking about those in this video in a little bit. And with that, I am going to give everybody the content warning of that there are going to be some very graphic images in this video. If you don't have a strong stomach, if you don't like seeing those sorts of things, definitely click away from this video because this is not for you. But for everybody else that's still left around, let's get started. So, there is a farm out in the middle of Mississippi that has existed since around the 1900s, right after the Civil War, and it's been used as basically a prison to house majority black people for the better part of the last 100 or so years. Now, it is known as Parchman Farm, like I was saying off the top, and it is a maximum security prison farm for men that happens to be the oldest prison in the entire state. Now, this prison has a long, disgusting history, and I want to get into it just a little bit. Now, like I said, it started off around the 1900s, right after the Civil War, and this prison was basically created so they could have a sort of lease program for the prisoners that show up. Basically, way back in the 1900s, just after the Civil War, when slaves were virtually freed, they created this Parchman Farm. Now, the idea behind it was basically to create a plantation or a work camp of sorts where they could take criminals, majority black criminals of course, and house them there so they could do work in these camps. Now, it existed as nothing more than a plantation that housed prisoners for a long, long time, right up until, I believe, the 1950s or the 1960s, when they were finally forced to build real buildings with real cells so they could actually have prisoners locked up inside of them. This prison has been known for doing the worst possible things all throughout its entire history. One of those heinous things happens to be during the 1960s when they had something known as the Freedom Riders coming to town, trying to eliminate segregation from all of the segregation states. Now, a lot of the states back then, specifically Mississippi, weren't upholding any of the laws that were set in place to get rid of segregation, because of course they wouldn't. States' rights and all that. So there were a group of individuals known as the Freedom Riders who would take buses and so forth to all of these different states so they could protest against these sorts of actions. And what did they do? Well, the good people of Mississippi decided that instead of beating or destroying these individuals, these Freedom Riders that were coming to town, which is what they wanted to do, they instead decided that they would just arrest them. So the second that they came into town, they were arrested and they were thrown into Parchman Farm, Mississippi State Penitentiary, and they were, for lack of a better word, tortured the entire time that they were there. They were forced to work in chain gangs where they had to break rocks all day long, and on top of that, they had to sleep in tiny, cramped, disgusting cells where they were fed terrible food and, of course, left with the lights on 24/7 because that was the policy there at the time. Of course, the warden and a lot of the politicians at the time were known as saying things like, we need to break these people's spirits, but not their bones, per se. So they did everything they possibly could to, like I said, torture these individuals. But that's only one small part of the entire disgusting history of this Parchman Farm hellhole. Now, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be showing some images of this prison, some of the conditions that these inmates have to live in, and I'm going to be doing that right now. So like I said, if you have a weak stomach, turn away or skip past this part, but here we go. So, like I said, hellish conditions, absolutely dungeon-like conditions, and you can see them in the pictures that I'm providing along with this. There was rotting food filled with black mold. The walls and roof and infrastructure of this entire building is suffering from incredible amounts of decay. There are ceiling panels that are falling down. There are urinals that are ripped off of walls. Improper plumbing. The water is yellow. There is no proper lighting throughout the entire building. Everything is dark and dingy and rotting and full of mold and festering. It's incredibly unsafe. There's trash piling up all over the place. Random animals crawling through the entire building. Holes that were pretty visibly created by shotgun shells in the walls, massive flooding throughout all sorts of areas, water all across the floors, rotting sewage in certain areas, in sinks, they're filled to the top with stagnant water. Basically everything in this entire prison is rotting, and the prisoners are forced to sleep on the floor. They're huddled in groups next to fans. They are literally living in the most squalor of conditions I have ever seen. This is third world conditions. This is worse than third world conditions. This is absolutely inhumane, the way that they're treating these human beings. Human fucking beings! But that's just the way it is. That's the way that they expect things to be. And unfortunately, in our society, we look at these individuals as being nothing more than criminals. They could be in there for any number of reasons, but we just look at them as being the dregs of society. It doesn't matter what happens to them because they did a bad thing. So we have to lock them in the bad place where bad things happen. It doesn't matter if these people were locked away for jaywalking or for nonviolent drug crime or whatever it is. Obviously, they'd be locked away in different prisons for those things. This is a maximum security. But outside of that, we lock people away for the worst, most terrible reasons. The state has made it so that every moment of your entire existence, you are basically in a position where you are about to commit or have committed some sort of crime. And I'm talking all kinds of crimes here. Jaywalking, turning a corner without properly signaling, I don't know, smoking too close to a doorway. All of these things make you into a criminal. Everything makes you into a criminal in this society because the society is built on criminality. When people say that slavery was abolished, I have a good, deep, hard belly laugh because it has not been abolished. It's been adapted. It's evolved into something harder to see. It's right in front of our faces every single day, but we just turn a blind eye towards it because it just seems like it's the normal thing to do. We take people that are the dregs of society and we put them away in this bad place, and then what do we do with them? We put them to work. We make sure that these prisoners are putting out fires or stamping license plates or doing whatever work we need them to be doing in this economy so they can pay a little bit less money for the labor that's involved in doing those things, just like we did during slavery. And if you notice, the majority of people that are put into prison are black and brown bodies, because of course they are, because this is the modern slavery. This is the modern Jim Crow. This is exactly what they wanted to do as soon as they got rid of slavery and segregation and those sorts of things. They just took it and adapted it and evolved it. It's the same thing with housing policy. City planners made sure that areas that were full of black and brown people were considered to be lower level housing. So all of a sudden, all of their properties were worth less. And of course, that created all sorts of ghettos. And let's not even get into the gerrymandering that happens just so they can take away the vote from these people. That's what this is. This is nothing more than modern day slavery. And the conditions that we're putting these people in while we're enslaving them is fucking disgusting. And you know what? I say we. I say we because a lot of us say we, but it's not we. It's them. It's the establishment. It's the elites that have all of the power and all of the control. They are the ones that are doing that to us, to the people. They take away our fathers, our brothers, our husbands, and lock them away inside of a cage where they can force us to do labor and force us to be tortured, treated as some sort of cattle in nothing more than a factory farm, put behind iron bars, and forced to eat rotting food. That's the condition that 22% of the world prison population is now facing. And of course, it isn't like this in every single prison. All of the state prisons, it most certainly is, but all of the private prisons, it might be a little bit better. But that's on purpose. They make sure that they defund all of the state prisons to see all of them decay and rot and crumble and become destroyed and unusable. So then the people can look at those prisons and say, these are hellish conditions, these are terrible. We need to take the people out of these prisons and put them into, wait for it, private prisons, which is exactly what's happening with Parchman Farm. The conditions are so bad that they're taking the prisoners out of there and putting them into private prisons, so private capitalists can make more money off of the prison industrial complex instead of having to share that wealth with, the government, who is also in the prison racket game. They make money on every single inmate that goes into their cells. They make money on every single bed that is filled, and that's why you see many, many, many gymnasiums in all of these prisons filled to the brink, with beds overcrowding the entire area so nobody has any room to even exercise or think. And then people wonder why all of a sudden there's eruptions in all of these areas where people are dying en masse, riots and stabbings and gang violence happening all across the entire industry because these people are being locked up and treated like fucking rats in a cage. And the part that bothers me the most about all of this is people constantly hear me saying that electoralism is a giant show, a giant spectacle that distracts everybody away from the important things that are happening in our world. And this has been happening. With this prison, Parchman Farm, Mississippi State Penitentiary, this has been happening under our noses. Not just here, but in every other prison across the entire country. This has been happening, and nobody has been paying attention to it. The only people that are even focusing on these things are the people that are either being directly affected by it or the protesters who, God love them, are out there every single day trying to fight for these people's rights. But it doesn't ever get broadcast in the news. It doesn't ever get talked about by the politicians. It never gets spoken about by anybody in the mainstream ever. Because we can't focus on the things that are rotting and decaying in our world. We can't focus on the real problems in our society because we have to be paying attention to the thing that Pete Buttigieg said. Or we have to be focusing on Donald Trump and his crazy tweets. But we never focus on the things that are actually affecting human beings. We don't focus on the poverty. We don't focus on the alienation. We don't focus on the isolation, the depression, all of these things that are affecting every single person across the entire country and across the entire world at this point. They're diseases of despair, and they're so prevalent everywhere you look. Boarded up buildings, people lying on the street in their own filth, and the rich just getting richer and richer. Every time you see an advertisement on TV for whatever it is, a yacht or a new fucking plane or a first class ticket to wherever the hell it is, how it doesn't just drive everyone to the brink of getting into the streets and marching in protest boggles my mind, because nobody can afford these things anymore. You're being advertised a beautiful steak in France when all you have is a McDonald's cheeseburger in your little tiny apartment underneath a fucking set of stairs. The entire system is decaying and falling apart. The entire system is a complete sham. The entire system is created to demoralize and beat you down to the point of where you can't even think about the problems that are happening, let alone do anything about them. And then you wonder why 15 people... By the way, I'm going to show some more graphic images here. And then you wonder why 15 people in these prisons have already, since just December, have been murdered or died in this system. Oh, and by the way, in Parchman Farm, 2 people went missing. Missing! In a fucking prison. How do you go missing inside of a fucking prison, inside of a cage that they literally lock you up in so you can't get out? But of course, if you look at the conditions, it's no wonder how somebody went missing in this place. It's a fucking hellhole. It's a goddamn disaster. But that's why we need to be getting out in the streets. That's why we need to be buying those little yellow vests and strapping them the fuck on and marching in protest side by side with one another so we can actually fix this problem. The only way that we make things better is not through voting. It's not through choosing some sort of electoral politician that's going to come and save us. Nobody is going to save us. You are the only one that can save you. You are the only one that can save all of us. Together, as a group, we can do that. Alone, we're nothing, but together we are actually something, and we need to be getting out there and actually doing things that make that difference. Voting for some fucking politician who says they're going to save us isn't going to make a difference. Nobody is coming to save you. Direct action and building dual power structures is our only way out of this. That's how we fix this problem. That's how we get to a point where we can actually fix the world. Anyway, I know I got a bit passionate while I was talking about this video, but it just absolutely viscerally makes me want to be sick to my stomach when I see this sort of thing. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Aaron. Have a nice day.